Waiting feels free. It is the most expensive thing you do. Nothing bills you for it. That is exactly why it works. Today we break down why postponing something changes its price, and why the cost never appears as a cost. Start with how people decide to put something off. It is not really a decision. There is a thing that should be done, it is inconvenient today, and doing it later is available at no apparent charge. Nobody weighs anything because there is nothing on the other side of the scale. Later has no price attached to it, so later always wins. There is a single question at the end of this that puts a price on later. We will build it. Here is the mechanism, and it is arithmetic rather than morality. Some problems have a fixed cost and some have a growing one. A fixed cost problem is the same size whenever you get to it. Those are the ones that genuinely can wait, and most small annoyances are in this category. A growing cost problem gets larger while you are not looking at it, and the growth is not related to how much you think about it. The two feel identical from the outside, and that is the whole difficulty. Which means the real error is almost never laziness. It is misclassification. People are not avoiding things they know are growing. They are treating growing things as if they were fixed, because both of them look like an item on a list. And a list does not record which items are compounding. So the ones that matter sit in exactly the same place as the ones that do not. Now, an objection, because postponing is frequently correct. Delay is a legitimate tool. Attention is finite, money is finite, and doing everything immediately is not a strategy, it is a way of running out of both. Plenty of things resolve themselves, become unnecessary, or turn out never to have mattered. So this is not an argument for urgency about everything. It is an argument for knowing which category something is in. If this is landing, tap subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Here is the question that sorts it. Is this the same size next year? Not is it important. Not is it urgent. Only that. If the answer is yes, put it wherever you like and stop feeling bad about it. If the answer is no, then waiting is not delay. It is a purchase, and you are buying time at a rate nobody has quoted you. That single question separates the things that punish patience from the things that reward it. There is a specific pattern in what grows, and it is remarkably consistent. Anything physical that is holding something else in place. Anything with a deadline attached, where the deadline has consequences that stack rather than repeat. Anything owed, where the amount is calculated on the amount. And anything about health, in the broadest sense, where a small problem is a different problem from a large one rather than a smaller version of it. Those four cover most of whatever genuinely goes wrong in an ordinary life. There is a second effect that makes it worse, and it is psychological rather than financial. The cost of thinking about it does not wait. An unresolved thing occupies attention continuously, whether or not you are doing anything about it, and that occupation is not free either. So the delay does not actually buy you relief. It buys you a repeated low-grade version of the same discomfort spread over months. Which is why finishing something small often produces a relief wildly out of proportion to the task. There is one more thing worth understanding because it explains why people freeze rather than act. As the cost grows, acting becomes harder, not easier. A small problem is embarrassing to have ignored for a week. A large one is embarrassing to have ignored for a year. So the very growth that should create urgency creates avoidance instead, because now there is a second thing to face. That loop is the actual mechanism behind most situations that get genuinely bad, and it has nothing to do with not understanding the arithmetic. There is a reason this class of problem is so easy to misjudge, and it is about how growth feels. Compounding is invisible for most of its life. Something that grows steadily spends the great majority of its existence being small, which is exactly the period during which it is easiest to dismiss. By the time it is large enough to demand attention, most of the growth has already occurred and the cheap options have gone. So the moment when action is most valuable is the moment when it feels least justified, and that inversion is the entire trap. There is a second thing that keeps people stuck, and it is about how a task presents itself. A deferred item stops being one task and becomes a bundle. Whatever it originally was, plus finding out how bad it has become, plus explaining the delay, plus the discomfort of looking at it. That bundle is what your mind estimates when you consider doing it, and the estimate is honest, which is why the avoidance is rational. The way out is not more resolve. It is to separate the bundle and do only the original task. There is one more distinction worth making because it saves a lot of unnecessary guilt. Not everything unpleasant is compounding, and not everything compounding is unpleasant. Plenty of things sit on lists for years and cost nothing at all by waiting, and treating those with urgency is a waste of a finite resource. Meanwhile, some of the fastest growing items are entirely painless to look at, which is why nobody looks at them. Discomfort is not the signal. Growth is the signal, and the two are unrelated. There is also a practical consequence for how to hold a list at all. Most lists are sorted by importance, which is the wrong axis. Importance is about how much something matters now. Growth is about how much it will matter later, and only one of those changes while you are not looking. A list sorted by growth would look strange, and it would be far more useful because it would put the boring, quiet, expanding items at the top where they belong. Nobody sorts a list that way, which is a large part of why the same items survive on it for years. It is worth being honest about the limits here. Some things cannot be dealt with when they should be, and that is not a failure of classification. Money, time, and capacity are real constraints, and telling somebody the cheapest moment was earlier is useless if earlier was not available. The claim is narrower than it sounds. It is that the cost exists whether or not it was avoidable, and that seeing it is better than not seeing it. Because a cost you can see can at least be chosen, and a cost you cannot see gets paid anyway. Once you see this, several things stop being confusing. Why the same handful of items stay on a list for years while everything around them gets done. Why the things that end up costing the most were never the things anybody worried about. Why an expense that arrives suddenly is almost always the final installment of something that had been accumulating quietly. And why people who seem lucky with money are frequently just people who deal with small things while they are still small. That is not discipline. It is classification done early. So, practically two things. Go through whatever list you carry, mentally or otherwise, and mark only one thing about each item. Same size next year or not. Then take the not and do the smallest possible version of it this week. Not the complete solution. The first step that stops the growth. Everything else can stay on the list indefinitely, with a clear conscience because it is genuinely waiting rather than compounding. That distinction is the whole of it, and it takes about 10 minutes to apply. Now back to the first question. Why was the cheapest time to fix it yesterday? Because waiting was never neutral. It was a transaction that happened without a receipt. The reason it feels free is that nothing arrives to tell you the price has changed, and the only moment you find out is the moment you can no longer choose. If this was useful, subscribe and let us keep going. What is the one thing on your list that is not the same size next year? Tell me in the comments. Understand money and you will see the world. The quiet part.